The Cold War was a period of geopolitical tension between the Soviet Union and the United States and their respective allies, the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc, after World War II. The Western allies promoted capitalism and democracy, while the Soviets sought to expand their communist ideology. One of the first significant events of the Cold War was the Berlin Blockade of 1948 to 1949. In response to the Western Allies' decision to introduce a new currency in West Berlin, the Soviet Union blockaded all land routes into the city. The Western Allies responded with the Berlin airlift, supplying West Berlin with food and fuel by air for nearly a year until the blockade was lifted. In 1949, the Cold War took on a new dimension with the formation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, a military alliance between the United States, Canada, and several Western European nations. In response, the Soviet Union and its allies formed the Warsaw Pact in 1955, solidifying the division of Europe into two opposing military blocs. The Cold War saw numerous crises and conflicts, including the Korean War, 1950 to 1953, where the United States and its allies supported South Korea against the communist North Korea, which was backed by China and the Soviet Union. The war ended in an armistice, with Korea remaining divided along the 38th parallel. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 was one of the most dangerous moments of the Cold War. The discovery of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the US coast, led to a tense 13-day standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union. Ultimately, the crisis was resolved when the Soviet Union agreed to remove the missiles in exchange for a US promise not to invade Cuba and the secret removal of US missiles from Turkey. The Cold War also played out in the space race, with the United States and the Soviet Union competing to achieve significant milestones in space exploration. The Soviets initially took the lead with the launch of Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, in 1957, and the first human, Yuri Gagarin, in space in 1961. However, the United States ultimately won the race to the moon with the Apollo 11 mission in 1969. During the 1970s, the Cold War entered a period of détente, a relaxation of tensions between the two superpowers. This era saw several arms control agreements, including the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT, and the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. However, détente ended with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, which led to a renewal of Cold War hostilities. The 1980s saw a dramatic escalation of the Cold War with the election of Ronald Reagan as US president. Reagan's administration took a hardline stance against the Soviet Union, significantly increasing military spending and pursuing the Strategic Defense Initiative, a proposed missile defense system that became known as Star Wars. However, Reagan also engaged in negotiations with the Soviet leadership, particularly with Mikhail Gorbachev, who became the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in 1985. Gorbachev introduced significant reforms known as perestroika, restructuring, and glasnost, openness, aimed at revitalizing the Soviet economy and society. These reforms, along with increased pressure from the United States and internal dissent within the Eastern Bloc, led to the unraveling of Soviet control over Eastern Europe. In 1989, the Berlin Wall, a powerful symbol of the Cold War, fell, leading to the reunification of Germany. The Cold War effectively ended with the dissolution of the Soviet Union in December 1991. The collapse of the Soviet Union marked the end of the bipolar world order and the emergence of the United States as the world's sole superpower. The legacy of the Cold War continues to shape international relations and global politics to this day. Thanks for watching.